Communications. Everyone and everything communicate. Humans, animals, and obviously in the digital world, machines too. But for the humans, and particularly for professionals, communication is not just about mastering a language, but how well we communicate our messages to an individual or to the masses as expected. Now, what it takes for one to communicate as expected depends on various parameters, such as confidence, clarity, emotions, and as well as these parameters do change based on the scenarios, be you are a doctor, you're a teacher, a product manager, or a motivational speaker. Today with me in this session is Dr. Alexa. She is a communication strategist, an expert in public speaking, impression management, and leadership. Currently, she is an executive education faculty at John Hopkins Carey Business School. Previously, she was associate professor of communication studies at University of Alabama. Alexa develops and delivers corporate and executive education courses on communication skills. And she's also an author of a very interesting book called Engineered to Speak. We are going to discuss and learn some of the key elements. But before we deep dive on these topics, let's learn a bit more about your background, Dr. Alexa. So could you
Okay.
briefly
Give
share
you
your
a
background
short,
and how you end up on the current role?
wonderful. Yes, I'm glad to be here on your show, CK. And I have a background in advertising and public relations. I worked as a development director for years for a nonprofit, and that really showed me the practical having to communicate within the organization as well as external to different audiences, right? Because for a nonprofit, communicating their mission and their vision and connecting with people is vital to their success. And then I returned to school and at the University of Alabama and completed my doctoral degree in mass communications. And so that really encompassed a lot of organizational communication and leadership. And so that is my expertise. I had an advisor who was wonderful, who was a consultant. And so many years ago, I really loved that, working with professionals and consulting with organizations to improve their leadership communication and their team communication to really boost their bottom line as well as morale within the company.
Wonderful. And we'll learn more about your previous work before the academia as well. I'm sure it has helped you a lot when you moved
Mm-hmm.
back to the academia. And to
Yes.
begin with, uh, when I when we see these two terms very much used, called soft skills
Mm-hmm.
versus communication skills. And organizations do emphasize on the need of soft skills, but I could be wrong, but personally I haven't seen much they highlighting about communication skills. So in your view, are these like two different skills, and are they specific to the roles in the organization? So how do we differentiate soft skills versus communication skills?
That is a great question. Soft skills is the term that I believe is kind of a catch all. And so it's about people's attitudes, their perceptions within their role, but it's also having to do with social and emotional intelligence. And communication skills is woven into all of that. And so our communication skills are seen as a soft skill. But remember, everything that we do within an organization, we're communicating somehow, right? Other than in your small silo of work, you're having to communicate to a colleague, down the hall, up to management, or out to the public. And so, how we manage those interpersonal interactions, colleague interactions, right, as well as kind of our day to day functions. Really, everything it touches communication. So, communication is, I would think, kind of a core soft skill.
Right. And you already mentioned that communication has always been critical in most of the professionals' role. But if you
Mm-hmm.
look back again, I think most of the people have spoken enough about COVID. But irrespectively, in last 20 month odd, most of the professionals, including me, and I'm sure you, mostly spending time remotely or in silo, working in a room. So, what has changed in the way we communicate? What are your observations and how it has changed the way professionals work and communicate to get their things done? I mean, like when I was in office, I can always have a discussion over coffee or the corridor. So, in your view, has it become difficult or easier to communicate with these wonderful tools? And one of them we are also
Mhm.
talking through. Uh, what has been your observation on this communications in this world for the last 20 months?
Right. I think there's been a large learning curve because people were grappling with being taken out of the organization and not being able to communicate or not being comfortable with the methods of communication, like virtual communication, that today, 20 months later, we're very comfortable with. And so I feel that a lot of times people felt very isolated immediately. They weren't in the loop of a lot of what was going on. They felt disconnected from their teams or from management. And what I'm hoping that has happened over the last year and a half is that people have created a new way to work. We found out that, and studies show that people are very productive out of the office, managing their own time. We've also found that we've had a lot of wasted time within organizations. And so, how do we now focus on communicating efficiently? We know that there are an enormous amount of emails, something like over 3 billion emails sent and received each day around the world. This is according to Statista, which is a statistic database. And I want to say that the number is about 316 million emails sent and received each day. And that inundation of communication. We have learned, I hope, how to really communicate smarter and to value people's time. So I think that's an upside. Here's a good example of that. At the beginning of COVID, if you used to have a weekly meeting that took an hour, people tried to transfer that 1 hour from face to face directly into virtual. What we're finding is that we need those meetings, but we need them more frequently, but shorter. So we need shorter meetings so that people are tuned in, right? Turned on to the information instead of longer meetings where their attention span is not that long. They're thinking about the other work that they have to do. So I believe that we're making our communication more efficient in many ways. Now, what we are having the problem with is team building, communicating as leaders with teams and trying to create that sense of community. And so I think that we're still struggling with that a little bit, but definitely a new way of communicating more efficiently and effectively if people can kind of shift their paradigm of how time is used.
Right. So yeah, so I agree with you that on the topic of that now we can have more efficient meeting and shorter meetings. But certain meetings, like I'll take my own example. So while I work with the leaders in the industry, I'm a faculty, also invited faculty in university in Singapore as well, where I take
Mm,
lectures. And before COVID, obviously, I used to personally go down and sit in front of the students in a big conference room versus this year where I did pretty much everything virtually. And obviously,
mhm.
as you know, in faculty in universities, they do give feedback also to the
Yes,
faculty. So to frankly share with you, my score dropped versus
correct.
the
Yeah.
previous year. So I had a pretty high score
Mhm.
from the students versus this year, which dropped not drastically, but it still dropped. So I
Sure.
was wondering actually, is it because that I could not engage with them? Because I like to engage, right? When I'm in front of the students or maybe in the meetings, I like to involve individuals to contribute, share the ideas, or do some things. Whereas I
Mhm.
can't see what is happening behind the screen, right? So,
Yes.
so how would you kind of highlight this part of engagement part of it, whether it's
Mhm.
one to one or whether it's in the team? Any thoughts you're seeing that how the professionals are dealing with this engagement level?
Not many are doing it well, but that is what happened. So we know that face-to-face communication is the richest form of communication because we are physically in the space with people. We are connecting with them in a very rich, meaningful way. And so outside of that, because of our environment and what's going on, this virtual environment has become a substitute. What we're having to do is to make up for that richness that we've lost. We can still see people, we can see your facial expressions, we can hear you, but we're not commanding people's attention because we're not in that physical space with them. So this is where it shifts to I would say the onus, right? The responsibility of the individual leading the meeting, whether it's a lecture or a team meeting at a corporation, is to really orchestrate that. And that has a lot to do with the platform that you're on. So if you're on a platform that has engagement tools, how do you use those engagement tools to try to keep that audience engaged with you? Whether it's you pose a question and put it in a chat box and ask everyone to answer it, you launch a poll or two to get some feedback, you put people into breakout rooms so that they have smaller conversations and then bring them back. All of those tools can really be used well and used to keep that engagement level higher than just kind of being I'm just broadcasting and they're consuming, because we know that people's attention span is about 8 seconds.
Right.
So that interactivity has to be a little more engaging. And so for leaders of corporations, once again, it's about choosing the channel which they're trying to communicate. So what messages are more strategic that could go into short emails, right? And not constantly, but so that people know that, hey, every Monday I'm getting an email that's a rundown, and they expect that, and they know that they're going to get highlights, whether it's shorter, more frequent meetings where everyone is standing up, right? Have your computer in a spot where you're standing up, you've got some energy flowing, you know that it's going to be didactic, people are going to be engaging, you're going to be called upon. So choosing the channels and choosing them wisely is a way to keep people engaged as much as possible. But you're correct, it has been a difficult learning curve. How do we substitute that presence, that physical presence, where people are accountable for paying attention to this kind of matter
And as
contact?
we spoke before we started the conversation, that communication is not just about mastering a script, right? It's more about delivering the script, whether using different parameters, like how fast I speak, how emotional elements I bring into it, right? What kind of tone I'm using, high pitch or low pitch, right? So there's a various, I don't know, we can count number of parameters, but in your view, my first question is, what are the key parameters to define a good communication, which generally any professional should keep in mind, like emotions, tone, speed. At the same time, do these parameters change with the professional role, such as the project managers who have to deal with pretty much, let's say, maybe technical professionals, product team, or maybe customers, versus a sales manager who has to deal mostly with the outward communication with the customer to sell, right? And then is the CEO at the top of the organization who have to communicate as more like from the PR perspective, from the strategy perspective. So to repeat myself, what defines a good communication in terms of
Yeah.
parameters, and how we kind of play around with these parameters depend on the either scenario or the role.
Okay. Well, I think the one key element to effective communication is clearly communicating what you want other people to know, what you want them to understand. And so in any intentional communication, you really have to prepare for that communication. So knowing ahead of time, this is the goal of my communication. This is what I really want to communicate. How do I structure that message? And so for the leader who's communicating to a team, or for the salesman who's communicating to an external audience, or for the project manager who's communicating, right? If they are in front of those individuals and they're trying to get their message across, the biggest parameter is organization of your message. So this is where we are today. This is where we want to go. And this is how we're planning to get there. So really breaking it into logical steps and keeping it focused so that people understand that there's a rationale for the communication. If we have a new project or a new strategy, then I'm going to get in front of my team and I'm going to speak to them, not in detail about the strategy, because I'm going to lose them, right? In an initial conversation, I'm going to talk to them about what are we trying to accomplish? What is this new strategy, and what is everyone's role in that strategy? So the magic number is 3. Having your communication broken down into 3 kind of main points that people can follow along. They don't get lost in the details. So that's the first thing. And keeping it short, right? Anytime that you're in front of an audience, think of Steve Jobs. Years ago, when he unveiled the iPhone for the first time to an audience, he had an audience of technical, professionals and engineers that were ready to consume his ideas. And he was a brilliant man. But when he spoke about the iPhone, what he said was, this is a device that can surf the internet, make phone calls, and listen to music. And he could deep dive into each one of those 3. But structure is the key element to any communication, to really focus on what you want people to take away from that. And then, of course, yes, as you said, are you engaging? Do you have vocal variety in your voice? Are you making eye contact with people? Those are more elements of delivery, but the message and the structure of that message and the intentionality is crucial.
Right, I agree. And as you know, all things connected deals with organizations pretty much who are driving all this topic of digital transformation, Industry 4.0. While CEO and management on these topics have like grand vision to transform the organization with emerging technologies, be it they talk about AI, 5G, robotics, automation, all those things. And these are complex in itself as a technology. Many times I notice they do struggle communicating such transformation initiatives all the way to the bottom. So think of a company talking about Industry 4.0 initiative in their multiple plants across the globe. A plant could be in Indonesia, a plant could be in Mexico, a plant could be in Canada, and each of them have different culture as such. So what is your recommendation that as the senior leaders who are already dealing with such complex transformation initiatives, any like few key nuggets which they should keep in mind again, on top of what you already mentioned, to communicate this to the bottom
Yeah.
of the organization and help them to contribute and align in terms of those initiatives rather than getting confused what they mean by this?
So the message of, let's say, that new transformation, right? The new initiative, the message has to be clear, and the message has to be the same message overarching, right? What is our goal? Why are we doing this? Because it doesn't matter who the audience is, they want to know the why of why is this important that our organization is taking on this new approach or this new technology? Why does it matter? Why does it matter to our customers, our consumers? And then they want to know, what is the role that we're going to play in that transformation? How is it going to impact them? So as a leader, understanding from the very top how to answer those questions. Why are we doing? Start with why. Why are we engaging in this new transformation? How is it going to impact the organization and its consumers in a positive way? And just being able to give that message consistently at all of the multiple levels, even externally to the stakeholders, that is the crucial message. Then as you go down the chain, you change what you include in that message based on your audience, right? So what is it that this specific audience needs to know about what their role is initiating or engaging with implementing this change? So high level, you need a consistent message that creates the justification for why you're doing it and why people should be bought into it. And then along the way, the message needs to really resonate with each individual audience and tell them specifically how their roles will are crucial to that change.
Right. And if I take example of how we do that as well, pretty much aligned with what you mentioned, when we support organizations on this transformation initiative, we also start with the question, as you said, why. So why it
Mm-hmm.
is in there for you. Then we go from why to what, means what
Mm-hmm.
exactly they should be doing. Then we go to how, basically talking about technology or process transformation and all those things. And then we touch upon who should do it, as
Ah.
in skills, partners, build versus buy decision. And as you said rightly, also that as we drill down to the bottom of the, I would say the pyramid in terms of the hierarchy, but more from the functional perspective, that
Mm-hmm.
the same topic, let's say I'm talking to the maintenance team, why they should be doing it, right? So as you said, the CEO has a vision, let's say, of sustainability, that organization have to be a sustainable organization in the future, which is like a very bold statement in itself.
Mm-hmm.
But when we talk to maintenance manager, for example, and we ask the same thing, why we should be doing sustainability, what is in there for you as an
Mm-hmm.
individual or a department itself, then what you should be doing in sustainability as a function, as a individual, then how we should be doing it, what kind of technologies, what kind of process changes, and then who should be doing it within your team to help meet this sustainability goal first within your functions, which aligns back all the way to the grand vision of the organization.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, first is grand vision, then try to simplify it to the functions and the individuals so that they get buy-in to this vision, and they feel connected also, that they're not doing it just because it's a part of their job, but they're contributing to something bigger objective and be part of the transformation itself. Right.
That's
So
right. I mean,
yeah,
that's a great method, right?
right. And let's talk a bit of your book about engineered to speak, right? So and this talks primarily focuses on the technical professionals, if I would say,
Mm-hmm.
right? So bit of background, what motivated you to write this book? What gap did you see in the community? And how was your
Yes.
thought process to come up with these ideas and approach and methodologies as a simplified approach which engineers and the technical professions can use? So some
Yeah.
of, yeah, background of the
Some of
book.
that background. When I was working at the University of Alabama, I was asked to create a communication curriculum for the aeronautical and mechanical engineering summer camp. And it was a research experience for undergraduates, which was funded by the National Science Foundation. And in the first couple of years of working with engineering students, very bright students from across the United States, it was difficult for me to get them to be engaged with the topic of communication and why communication was important. But the goal of that summer camp and my part of that was to teach them how to do technical presentations, 3-minute presentations, poster presentations, down to research presentations for conferences. And that kind of really started me on a journey of working with engineers and engineering students. And then what we found out over the years of teaching public speaking was that engineering students loved a process. They love a process. So if you tell them that you can show them the process to how to make a presentation great, how to organize it, how to create visual aids that are complementary to their message, and then how to deliver it with confidence and a little charisma, right? Then they embrace that process. They really love a process, and they do extremely well. And so it was years of me working with engineering students and then some professionals. And then I was approached by Wiley Press, which is the scientific press, about writing this for professionals. And I loved that process because it gave me an excuse to interview technical professionals from around the world about their own presentations, how they crafted presentations, how they delivered them, their challenges, what they found was successful, and take that process that I knew and really kind of tailor it for engineering and technical professionals. So it's a book that is really kind of a book, but it's a workbook. And so as people read a little bit about, let's say, the justification for why they should learn these things and how to put presentations together and to make them great and engaging. And then we give them the process. So it's actually a guidebook. And so people work through a process of their own presentation. So it's a repeatable process workbook, if you will. So I really just wanted to focus it for people to use day to day in their professional lives.
Interesting. And one of the challenges, as we have been, I think, emphasizing multiple times, the communications skills is very critical in any professional role. But when I speak to many professionals, they don't have access or maybe not able to afford the experts, maybe Alexa, like yourself, right? Unless you kind of clone yourself in thousands of times as such. So a lot of companies, including ourselves, are working on some of those ideas of how can we automate this communication skills methodologies, right? But in your view, is this something possible to, like, for example, when you discuss with, let's say, professionals and presume that you have to train CK on good communication skills, you can always sit with me in person and judge me and train me, okay, CK, change your pitch, change your tone, change your emotions. So all these different parameters, as we discussed earlier, is easy for a communications coach to help improve. Do you think we can automate this process with a platform with some machine learning algorithms, or I would say replacing the communications coach, but complementing them, making it more accessible to the larger audience? Because we have, like, I don't know, like take example of India. Every year there are millions of engineers coming out. Not everybody can afford. So how can we democratize these critical skills and make Alexa available to millions of individuals who need that skill?
I think it is absolutely possible to give people the resources for understanding how to, let's just take, for example, a presentation, giving a 5-minute presentation, a business pitch, a project update. I mean, whatever that is, giving them the guide for how to do that, which, this is the same process that's been used for many, many years. It's not my process, right? Might have my spin to it. So that information is, if you make that available, and then the software to allow people to, let's say, record their presentations and have those algorithms pick up their voice, pick up their verbal fillers. Are they saying, like, are they using inclusive language, we, our, for the audience engagement? Tracking eye, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a tech expert, but tracking eye contact. So I think there are definite ways that AI could capture someone's performance, their practice, and then give them that feedback that they could then improve and continue to kind of submit and improve and have their own self professional development process.
But this is a bit of off topic. I'm not sure how much would you like to share your thoughts on that. But these AI and machine learning tools obviously need to listen and watch people and analyze the data. Do you think that individuals will be comfortable with this kind of, do they perceive it as a privacy breach? Hey, now somebody is listening to me, analyzing my behavior. And any thoughts on that, how individuals will perceive about it? Any research or anything you have come across?
Think about how people are submitting their information all of the time. They're putting their information, their own videos, their pictures on social media platforms. I think there are plenty of platforms where people can record themselves, and they know that it has to go through some type of algorithm, that it's going to be measured, that it's going to come back to them. I'm not really sure that would be too much of a concern for anyone.
maybe it is a kind of a generation as well as behavioral change.
Mm,
So as we see in the TikTok generation, and in fact, you might be aware of TikTok has launched a product called TikTok Resume. Apparently, I came
mm,
across it, and they are, I think, testing it out. Can't remember correctly. It is in US or maybe in Canada. That while you see a lot of funny videos on TikTok, but now you can submit your resume through TikTok, which I'm presuming they've learned enough the emotions, the behavior of the human, and then
okay.
it will accelerate the maybe the selection process, hopefully, but without being biased. I also hope that. Right.
Hmm.
Okay. So we are pretty much coming close to the
Okay.
our conversation, and before we wrap up, any few takeaway because our audience, as I mentioned, is pretty much who works in the emerging technology spaces. They could be senior leaders, they could be startup founders, they could be project managers, or maybe even the academia who's preparing the next generation. So, what will be your few uh, points for them to keep in mind out of this conversation?
Okay. Well, first of all, there are no perfect communicators. That this is a skill, even though it's supposedly a soft skill, it is a skill to continually learn, and that there are brilliant people, brilliant technical individuals who have great challenges clearly and simply communicating to their message in a way to engage their audience. So that is not an uncommon issue, right? And in fact, very high intelligent technical professionals sometimes get bogged down in the details, in the data. They want to share every step along the process. And so I would just encourage people to kind of really take a step back and to think more kind of high level about how they're communicating. And as you talked about, kind of the what, the why, the what, the how, in simple terms. Think also about who their audience is, and eliminating a lot of jargon based on that audience, not dumbing it down, but really speaking to the audience, because that's what makes a communicator proficient, is understanding who their audience is and meeting them, that audience, where they need to be met.
Wonderful. And I think I will close with a quote uh, from Indra Nooyi. She said in one of the women leadership conference a couple of years back that you can't overinvest in communication skills. So I think communication skills is something which will always be required. The way we used to speak maybe a few decades before versus now versus my daughter when she grows up and get ready for the workforce, she might be talking maybe I don't know through brain communications. Communication will change. I think
Mm-hmm.
communication as a fundamental, whether the technology we use or in person or virtual, at the end
Mm-hmm.
of the day, it's a human to human connection, and those parameters, the emotions, the tones, the vocal varieties, and all lot of things will always help to
Mm-hmm.
communicate the message. As we discussed earlier, that is not just about reading a script to the audience or sending a memo to the employees. Is the message we want to communicate so that they understood the why this is being
Mm-hmm.
communicated and what we are expecting them to be part of this communication. So for the audience, feel free to reach out to Alexa. I'm sure she'll be very happy to have a conversation with you on this topic. And I'm sure we are going to host a lot more such discussion with you, Alexa, and invite you more often, hopefully, in the next few
Thank you.
months to discuss on this topic and hopefully to use or your expertise to some of those professionals in this part of the world, in Singapore and
Yeah.
Southeast Asia.
Well, and people can reach out to me. The easiest way to find me is on LinkedIn.
Right. So once more time, thank you so much, Dr. Alexa. It was a pleasure speaking with you and look forward for the future conversation again. Thank you so much.
Thank you, CK.